The crystalline spires of the Varaxian capital glittered like daggers against the violet sky, a beauty as dangerous as it was breathtaking. Marcus Vale adjusted his diplomatic sash, trying to quell the flutter of nerves in his stomach. Intelligence briefings hadn't prepared him for the sheer scale of alien architecture that seemed designed to make visitors feel insignificant. "Remember," Commander Ellis whispered beside him, "bow from the waist, eyes down, speak only when addressed directly." The older diplomat's face was tight with strain. One wrong move, and we could set human-Varaxian relations back decades. Marcus nodded, though something about memorized protocols felt hollow. The delegation of 7 humans proceeded through the grand hall, their footsteps echoing against obsidian floors that reflected their images like dark water. Varaxian guards flanked them, tall humanoids with iridescent scales instead of skin, their eyes vertical slits of amber that betrayed no emotion. The imperial throne room opened before them, a cathedral to power rather than divinity. Hundreds of Varaxian nobles stood in perfect formation, their bodies adorned with bioluminescent markings that indicated clan and rank. And there, elevated on a platform of what appeared to be liquid metal, sat Empress Calidra. Marcus felt his breath catch. Unlike her subjects, her scales were midnight blue, almost black, with patterns that resembled star constellations. Her eyes were not amber but silver, reflecting light like twin moons. Intelligence reports claimed she was over 400 years old, though she appeared in her prime. The weight of her gaze felt physical, probing, dissecting. "The human delegation is acknowledged," announced a court official. "Approach and present your offerings." Commander Ellis stepped forward first, presenting a container of Earth's rarest elements. The rest followed with their gifts: art, music recordings, scientific data. When Marcus's turn came, he presented his offering, a small terrarium containing a bonsai tree, its roots wrapped around a piece of carved jade. "An organism that exists in harmony with stone," he explained when permitted to speak. "On Earth, it symbolizes balance between strength and adaptability." The Empress's silver eyes narrowed slightly, the first change in her expression since their arrival. She leaned forward, one slender hand extending. The court collectively inhaled. Apparently, the Empress rarely showed interest in diplomatic gifts. "You bring life as an offering," she stated, her voice surprisingly melodic despite its coldness. "Curious. Most species bring dead things to impress me." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted near the back of the delegation. Diplomat Jensen, the youngest member of their team, had removed a small device from his pocket, a holographic projector intended as a secondary gift. But Varaxian guards immediately surrounded him, weapons drawn. "Unauthorized technology in the Imperial presence is punishable by death," announced the court official, voice devoid of inflection. "The sentence is immediate." Everything happened in seconds. The guard seized Jensen, who dropped the device in panic. Commander Ellis began frantically explaining it was merely a cultural artifact, not a weapon, but the Varaxians were already dragging Jensen toward a side chamber. Marcus acted without thinking. He stepped out of formation and approached the throne directly, a violation of every protocol. "Empress Calidra," he called, ignoring Ellis's horrified gasp, "I request mercy for my colleague who meant no disrespect. If punishment must be given, let it fall on me as a senior." The court froze in collective shock. The Empress's silver eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "You disrupt my court," she stated, "and challenge my law." Her head tilted slightly. "Approach closer, human." Marcus walked forward until he stood at the base of her liquid metal dais. Up close, he could see that what appeared to be jewelry were actually delicate mechanical enhancements fused with her scales, technology, and biology seamlessly merged. "Do you fear me?" she asked, her voice lower now, meant only for him. "I respect your power," Marcus replied honestly, "but I fear losing a promising young diplomat to a misunderstanding more." Something flickered across her face, so briefly he almost missed it. Confusion? Interest? "In 17 systems, none dare speak to me with such directness." She studied him as one might examine an unexpected variable in an experiment. "Your species is young, impulsive, yet you show courage rather than deference." She gestured with one hand, and the guards released Jensen. "The human transgression will be overlooked. Once." She leaned forward, her face inches from Marcus's. "But you have placed yourself in my debt, Marcus Vale. Remember that." As Marcus returned to his delegation, he caught the Empress watching him. Her silver eyes slightly widened, one hand unconsciously touching her chest as if checking that something was still there. What none of the humans could know was that Empress Calidra had just experienced something she hadn't felt in centuries, a single beat of her heart that wasn't coldly regulated by Imperial cybernetics. And it terrified her. 2 Varaxian moons cast opposing shadows across the palace gardens as Marcus leaned against the crystalline railing. 3 weeks into his extended diplomatic assignment, and still the alien beauty of this world took his breath away. Behind him, the evening's negotiations had finally concluded, hours of careful words and measured responses. "You find our gardens pleasing?" The melodic voice startled him. Marcus turned to find Empress Calidra standing mere feet away, without her usual entourage. Her midnight blue scales caught the moonlight, the constellation patterns shifting subtly with her movements. "I find them." Marcus chose his words carefully, structured yet alive. "Much like your empire." A flicker of something amusement crossed her silver eyes. "Most visitors call them beautiful. Beauty is expected of imperial gardens. The balance between control and natural growth is more remarkable." The Empress moved beside him, her ceremonial robes replaced by simpler attire that still radiated authority. "You speak differently than your colleagues, Marcus Vale. They offer compliments. You offer observations. Would you prefer compliments, Empress?" "I receive 17,000 formal compliments each day." Her voice remained even, but something in her posture shifted. "Observations are rarer." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Nexer, the Varaxian High Chamberlain, his copper scales gleaming with disapproval. "Empress, the Meridian ambassador awaits your audience." His vertical pupils darted to Marcus. "Perhaps the human should retire to his quarters." "Perhaps," Calidra replied coolly. "The High Chamberlain should remember who determines imperial schedules." Nexer bowed stiffly, retreating several steps. "Rest well, Marcus Vale," the Empress said. "Tomorrow's negotiations regarding the Centauri passage will require your unique perspective." Marcus watched her glide away, surrounded once more by advisors materializing from the shadows. Only after she disappeared did he notice the small crystalline bloom that had appeared on the railing where her hand had rested. A rare night blossom that palace staff whispered only grew in the Empress's private chambers. The explosion came 3 days later during a ceremonial procession through the capital city. Marcus was walking 15 paces behind the Imperial platform when the ground erupted in blue flames. Debris and bodies flew as the crowd scattered in panic. Without conscious thought, Marcus sprinted toward the chaos. The platform had collapsed, security forces scrambling to locate the Empress. Marcus spotted her first, her midnight scales visible beneath fallen ceremonial arches, a Varaxian guard dead across her lower body. "Here," he shouted, ignoring protocols as he cleared debris away. Calidra's eyes flickered open, silver irises contracting in pain. A jagged metal shard protruded from her shoulder, leaking iridescent blue blood. "The crowd," she whispered, voice strained. "Assess casualties." "Your guards will handle that," Marcus replied, examining the wound. "This needs immediate attention. Imperial protocol demands." "Imperial protocol won't stop you from bleeding out." He tore fabric from his own diplomatic uniform, applying pressure around the metal shard. "Your bodyguard took most of the blast." Her eyes fixed on the dead Varaxian. Terzak. He had 7 offspring. The personal observation surprised Marcus more than the assassination attempt. Before he could respond, more guards arrived, weapons raised until they recognized the Empress. Within moments, medical drones swarmed over them. "The human stays with me," Calidra commanded as they attempted to separate them. He prevented further blood loss. Later, in the Palace Medical Center, Marcus waited outside the Empress's treatment chamber. Commander Ellis paced nervously. "You touched her," Ellis whispered, horrified. "Physical contact with the Empress is forbidden except for Imperial physicians." She was injured. 3 diplomats were executed on Rigel Prime for accidentally brushing against her predecessor's robe. Ellis continued. "You directly touched her body." Before Marcus could respond, the chamber door slid open. High Chamberlain Nexer emerged, his expression inscrutable. "The human Marcus Vale will enter. Alone." The medical chamber glowed with soft blue light. Calidra reclined on a hovering platform, medical nanites visible beneath her scales as they repaired damage. The metal shard had been removed, leaving a sealed wound. "You disobeyed multiple protocols today," she stated without preamble. Marcus stood straight. I did. The penalty is severe. I'm aware, Empress. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she gestured toward a seat beside her platform. Why? She asked simply. Why what? Why risk execution to assist me? Your position here is temporary. My death would not affect your career progression. Marcus sat, choosing honesty over diplomacy. Because you were injured and needed help. The politics came second. Illogical. Her silver eyes studied him. Everything in the imperial court happens for political advantage. Not everything, Marcus countered. Some things happen because they're right. Right? She repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar word. Your species places unusual value on abstract concepts. Perhaps your species once did too. The statement hung between them, bold and dangerous. Marcus knew from his historical research that the Viraxians had not always been the emotionally restrained species they now presented. Instead of anger, Callidra's expression shifted to something more vulnerable. You've been studying our ancient texts. The ones I'm permitted to access. She was quiet for several moments, medical nanites pulsing beneath her scales. Then, with a gesture to the room's sensors, she deactivated the recording systems. There was a time, she said softly, when my ancestors felt as your kind does. Before the great restructuring, before imperial enhancements. Her hand moved to a point just below her sternum, where a faint blue light pulsed. Do you know what this is? Marcus shook his head. An emotional regulator. All Viraxian royalty received them upon ascension. For 100 years I've worn it, dampening what your kind experiences freely. Marcus leaned forward. Can it be removed? Removal would mean abdicating the throne. Her eyes met his. Emotion is deemed incompatible with ruling 17-star systems. Yet today, when injured, you asked about your guard's children. Callidra's hand moved unconsciously to her regulator. Hey, malfunction, perhaps. Since your arrival, there have been irregularities. The intimacy of the moment was interrupted as the medical chamber door slid open. Security forces entered, followed by Nexer. The assassination attempt has been traced to the hegemony, the Chamberlain announced. Our borders are now on highest alert. Callidra's expression immediately reverted to imperial detachment. Increased security protocols. The human delegation will remain under palace protection until the perpetrators are found. Only as Marcus was escorted out did he notice something extraordinary. The medical nanites beneath her scales near the regulator were pulsing in an irregular pattern, not the precise rhythm that imperial technology typically maintained. Something was changing within the Empress. And somehow, improbably, he was part of that change. The ancient Viraxian text glowed faintly on the archival screen, its script nearly indecipherable to anyone not trained in pre-imperial linguistics. Marcus traced the symbols with his finger, grateful for the translation algorithm he'd discreetly developed over weeks of late-night research. The Viraxian heart contains dual chambers of emotional resonance, he read quietly. One for personal connection, one for collective harmony. Only when both beat in synchrony can a soul truly know itself. An unusual choice of study material for a human diplomat. Marcus startled at the voice, turning to find Empress Callidra standing in the doorway of the restricted archives. Alone, again defying protocols that demanded she travel with security details within the palace. I was granted limited access to historical documents, Marcus explained, though they both knew these particular texts were well beyond his clearance level. By whom? Her tone held curiosity rather than accusation. By a convenient system glitch that appeared in my terminal 3 nights ago. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. How fortunate. 6 weeks had passed since the assassination attempt. 6 weeks of increasingly frequent, accidental encounters in palace corridors, gardens, and now, apparently, restricted archives. Each meeting slightly longer than the last, each conversation venturing further beyond diplomatic pleasantries. Callidra approached the screen, her midnight scale shimmering beneath the simple silver robe she wore, far from her formal imperial attire. These texts date from before the Great Restructuring, when we still allowed ourselves to feel. Did it happen all at once? Marcus asked. The transition to emotional regulation? Over generations. First the nobility, then military leadership, eventually most citizens. She gestured to the text. This document describes what we sacrificed for stability. Was it worth it? The question hung between them, dangerous in its directness. Callidra's silver eyes met his. For 400 years, I believed so. Her voice softened. Now I find myself uncertain. The admission seemed to surprise even her. She moved closer to the screen, their shoulders nearly touching. Your presence disrupts patterns I thought immutable, she continued. The regulators function by dampening neural responses to emotional stimuli. Yet around you. Her hand moved to the faint blue light beneath her scales. The system encounters resistance. Marcus held his breath, feeling the weight of her confession. Is that why you keep finding reasons for us to meet? Perhaps. Something vulnerable flickered across her face. Or perhaps I simply find your perspective valuable. Is that what you tell your High Council? The High Council believes I am studying human diplomatic techniques. A hint of defiance colored her tone. What they don't understand is that there's more to learn from your species than negotiation tactics. A distant sound of palace guards changing shifts reminded them both of the risk they were taking. Calidra stepped back slightly. Come, she said suddenly. There's something I wish to show you. The Imperial Observatory spanned the highest level of the palace, its crystalline dome offering an unobstructed view of Varaxian skies. As the automated systems recognized the Empress, the dome's opacity adjusted, revealing the spectacular cosmic display above. 3 moons in perfect alignment, casting prismatic light across the twin nebulae that embraced the Varaxian system. Only from this vantage point, Calidra explained, can one see both the ancestral nebula and the path of progress simultaneously. She gestured upward. Our past and our potential future balanced in the sky. Marcus stared in wonder. It's breathtaking. Yes, she agreed, though her gaze had shifted from the celestial spectacle to his face. The experience of beauty without calculation is unfamiliar to me. They stood side by side at the observatory's edge, close enough that Marcus could feel the subtle heat emanating from her scales. The silence between them held a tension neither dared acknowledge directly. The High Council received concerning reports today, Calidra finally said, her voice lower than before. They believe you exert some form of influence over me, that your human emotionalism is contagious. Marcus turned to face her. And what do you believe? I believe 4 centuries of emotional regulation are failing. Her silver eyes reflected the nebulae above. When you defended your colleague that first day, something awakened. Since then, the regulator has been unable to fully suppress what emerges in your presence. Is that dangerous for you? Potentially fatal. She spoke matter-of-factly. The regulators are integrated with our central nervous systems. Malfunction risks systemic collapse. The revelation hit Marcus like physical pain. Then perhaps we should limit our interactions. I've considered that solution. Her voice held a new intensity. I find it unacceptable. Slowly, deliberately, Calidra extended her hand into the space between them. The gesture, small yet monumental, violated centuries of imperial tradition forbidding casual contact with the Empress. In ancient times, she whispered, Varaxians believed that physical contact revealed the truth of another's soul. Marcus understood the significance of what she offered. With careful reverence, he raised his hand to hers. Their fingers met, human skin against Varaxian scales, warm, smooth, alive with subtle energy. The moment their hands touched, a visible pulse of blue light emanated from the regulator beneath Calidra's scales. She gasped, her free hand pressing against her chest. Are you all right? Marcus asked, alarmed but not withdrawing his touch. Yes, she breathed, wonder in her voice. For the first time in centuries, yes. The light beneath her scales stabilized into a new rhythm, not the measured imperial cadence, but something more organic, more alive. Your heart, Marcus whispered. It's remembering. Her fingers interlaced with his. You asked if emotional regulation was worth the sacrifice. I believed it was, until I met someone who made me question everything I've built my empire upon. She stepped closer, their joined hands pressed between them. You will break me, Marcus Vale, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotions long suppressed. You will undo centuries of careful control. Do you want me to stop? He asked. Her answer came not in words, but in her free hand rising to touch his face. An act so forbidden that generations of Varaxians would consider it sacrilege. No, she finally said. Whatever comes, I cannot return to a half-life of regulated emptiness. Above them, the aligned moons cast their light across the joined forms of human and Empress, while below, palace sensors recorded the unprecedented proximity, data that would soon reach the High Council and trigger the crisis neither could yet imagine. The emergency alert shattered the pre-dawn quiet, bathing Marcus's quarters in pulsing red light. He was already reaching for his comm device when palace security forces burst through the door, weapons drawn. By order of the High Council, Marcus Vale is detained for investigation of Imperium interference, announced Captain Vordax, his amber eyes cold with duty. What interference? Marcus demanded as they secured his wrist with energy restraints. Where is Empress Calidra? The Empress is indisposed, replied the captain. The council now administers imperial authority. As they marched him through corridors that had become familiar over 2 months of diplomatic residence, Marcus saw the signs of political upheaval everywhere: increased security, nervous staff, whispered conversations that ceased at his approach. Something fundamental had shifted in the palace hierarchy overnight. They brought him not to the detention cells but to the High Council chamber itself, 12 Varaxian elders seated in a perfect semicircle, their scales ranging from copper to pale silver, all bearing the distinctive enhancements of imperial leadership. At the center, High Chamberlain Nexer presided where the Empress's throne should have been. Marcus Vale, Nexer's voice carried the artificial precision of a Varaxian whose emotional regulator was operating at maximum suppression. Evidence has been presented of your deliberate interference with imperial stability protocols. I violated no diplomatic agreements, Marcus stated calmly, though his heart raced. Where is Empress Calidra? A murmur rippled through the council. Nexer's vertical pupils narrowed. The Empress has been temporarily relieved of duties while undergoing regulatory recalibration. He gestured to a holographic display that materialized in the chamber's center, surveillance footage from the observatory showing Marcus and Calidra's hands touching, the visible pulse of her emotional regulator, their faces drawing closer. Contact with the imperial person is expressly forbidden, continued Nexer. More significantly, your influence has caused critical malfunction of the Empress's emotional regulation systems. Medical scans indicate patterns resembling those of pre-imperial Viraxians, chaotic, unpredictable, incompatible with stable governance. Another counselor leaned forward, scales shimmering with bioluminescent urgency. 3 systems have already reported unrest upon learning of the Empress's condition. The hegemony probes our borders for weakness. The Empire stands at the precipice of chaos, human. Marcus studied the faces before him, recognizing fear beneath their regulated exteriors. Your empire stood for millennia before emotional regulation became mandatory. Your ancestors built wonders while feeling deeply. Ancient sentimentality, dismissed Nexer. Before we understood the efficiency of regulated governance. Is efficiency the only measure of successful civilization? Marcus challenged. What of connection? Growth? Love? The last word caused visible discomfort among the council members. One elder's regulator visibly pulsed in rejection of the concept. Your presence has compromised imperial security, Nexer declared, rising from his seat. The council has determined that your continued existence threatens stability across 17 systems. Marcus felt cold realization wash over him. You're planning to execute me. Not immediately, Nexer replied. First, you will be transported to the medical research facility on Viraxis Prime. Study of your neurological patterns may reveal how you've managed to disrupt the Empress's regulatory systems. And Calidra? What happens to her? The Empress will undergo complete neural recalibration. Any irregularities caused by your interaction will be purged. The thought of Calidra's emerging emotions, her rediscovered capacity for connection, being surgically erased filled Marcus with cold fury. She won't consent to that. The Empress's consent is irrelevant when imperial stability is at risk. Nexer nodded to the guards. Remove the human to the transport vessel. As they dragged him from the chamber, Marcus caught a glimpse through a crystal partition of another chamber where medical drones surrounded a familiar figure. Calidra lay unconscious on an examination platform, her midnight scales dulled, the regulator in her chest pulsing with artificial rhythm as technicians prepared calibration equipment. Their eyes met for just a moment before the partition frosted opaque, but in that instant, Marcus saw recognition, determination, and something else entirely new in her silver gaze. The rebel compound on Viraxis 3 hummed with tense activity as Marcus studied the tactical display. 3 weeks since his kidnapping, though the truth was far more complex. The transport carrying him to the research facility had been intercepted by forces loyal not to the current High Council, but to the imperial bloodline itself. The eastern provinces have declared for the Empress, reported Commander the Lax, a Varaxian whose scales bore the distinctive bronze of the outer colonies. Unlike the Imperial elites, her eyes held open emotion, concern, determination, hope. That makes 7 major settlements rejecting the Council's authority. Marcus nodded, studying the spreading pattern of resistance. What had begun as his extraction had catalyzed into something far larger, a movement of Viraxians who questioned the very foundation of emotional regulation. And the palace? He asked, the question that had consumed him since separation from Calidra. Still under Council control, the Lax replied. But our intelligence suggests the Empress fights the recalibration. 3 medical teams have already resigned rather than continue the procedure. A commotion at the compound entrance interrupted them. Guards parted as an unexpected figure entered, Commander Ellis from the human delegation. Marcus, Ellis exclaimed, visibly relieved. Thank God you're alive. Ellis? How did you find this place? I didn't. The older diplomat gestured to the doorway where a hooded figure now stood. She did. The figure stepped forward, lowering her hood to reveal copper scales and amber eyes. Not Calidra, but Matra, the Empress's personal physician. The High Council believes you instigated rebellion, Matra stated without preamble. They are partly correct. But what they don't understand is that something more profound is happening across the Empire. She activated a portable holographic projector, displaying medical scans of various Viraxian biosignatures. These are readings from Imperial citizens across 3 systems, she explained. Each shows the same anomaly, emotional regulators functioning below optimal parameters. Marcus studied the data. They're failing. Not failing, evolving. Mitra's voice held wonder. Exposure to the Empress's changing patterns has triggered a sympathetic response in connected citizens. The phenomenon is spreading through the Imperial Connection Network. I don't understand, Ellis interjected. Matra turned to him. All Viraxian regulators are subtly linked to the Empress's own, an ancient safeguard ensuring Imperial harmony. But when her regulator began responding to human emotional patterns, it created a cascading effect, Marcus finished, comprehension dawning. The entire species is being affected. Yes, confirmed Matra. What began with one human's influence on the Empress now touches thousands, perhaps millions. The High Council calls it contamination. Others call it awakening. And Calidra? Marcus asked, dread mixing with hope. Have they completed her recalibration? Mitra's expression shifted to one of urgency. The Empress resists through means we never imagined possible. She has placed herself in ancient metabolic stasis, neither conscious nor fully unconscious, beyond the reach of recalibration technology. She's protecting herself, Marcus realized. And waiting, Matra added. But she cannot maintain this state indefinitely. Within days, the Council will override her biological resistance with more invasive methods. Commander the Lax stepped forward, determination evident in her posture. Then we must move quickly. The palace defense grid weakens with each province that joins our cause. Ellis looked between them, bewildered. You're planning to assault the Imperial Palace? That's suicide. Not assault, Marcus corrected, studying the tactical display with new purpose. Liberation. The Imperial Palace blazed with emergency lighting as alarms echoed through ancient corridors. Marcus moved swiftly alongside Commander the Lax and a small team of rebels, their approach facilitated by palace staff who had secretly joined their cause. The medical chamber is 3 levels up, the Lax whispered as they paused at an intersection. Security will be heaviest there. We don't need to fight through them, Marcus replied, activating the schematics Matra had provided. There's another way. They diverted through maintenance tunnels, emerging near the private observatory where he and Calidra had shared that pivotal moment. The memory strengthened his resolve as they encountered their first resistance, palace guards who hesitated at the sight of Commander Thalax's provincial insignia. The Empress requires your loyalty, the Lax stated firmly. Not to me, not to the Council, but to her true self. Something shifted in the guards' expressions, doubt, consideration, then decision. They lowered their weapons. The recalibration chamber is secured by Nexer's personal guard, one offered. But there is a service entrance through the environmental control room. With each step deeper into the palace, Marcus was struck by how many Viraxians chose to aid rather than hinder their progress. What had begun as a rescue mission was revealing itself as something far more profound, a society at the tipping point of transformation. When they finally reached the environmental control room adjacent to the medical chamber, Marcus glimpsed Calidra through monitoring screens. She lay motionless on the examination platform, surrounded by increasingly complex medical equipment. Nexer stood nearby, his expression severe as technicians reported another failed recalibration attempt. Her resistance is unprecedented, a medical officer was explaining. The stasis state protects core neural pathways from external manipulation. Then we proceed to direct neural interface, Nexer ordered. Prepare the cortical override. Marcus recognized the device they wheeled forward, similar to equipment he'd seen in historical archives, used during the original Great Restructuring centuries ago. Not recalibration, but complete neural rewriting. Now, he whispered to the Lax. Their team moved with precision, disabling environmental controls to trigger emergency protocols. As warning systems blared and medical staff scrambled to secure equipment, Marcus slipped through the service entrance alone. He reached Callidra's side just as Nexer turned to confront the disturbance. The High Chamberlain's eyes widened in shock. Yui hissed. Impossible. It's over, Nexer, Marcus stated calmly. 7 provinces have declared for the Empress, her true self, not your regulated version. Temporary insurrection, Nexer dismissed, though uncertainty flickered across his features. The Empire requires stability. The Empire requires growth. Marcus placed his hand gently over Callidra's regulator, feeling its irregular pulse beneath her scales. You fear change because you've forgotten how to adapt. Security forces burst into the chamber, but instead of attacking, they hesitated, torn between lifelong conditioning and the new emotions stirring within their own regulators. In the moment of confusion, Marcus leaned close to Callidra's ear, voice soft but urgent. Callidra, if you can hear me, it's time to wake up. Your people need you. I need you. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, beneath his palm, the regulator's pulse strengthened, quickened. Callidra's silver eyes snapped open, blazing with intensity that made everyone in the chamber step back. High Chamberlain Nexer, she stated, her voice carrying imperial authority despite her prone position. You have exceeded your mandate. With unexpected strength, she sat upright, disconnecting monitoring equipment with deliberate movements. The regulator in her chest now pulsed with brilliant blue light, not the steady rhythm of imperial control, but a dynamic pattern that somehow appeared more natural, more alive. Empress, Nexer pleaded, the recalibration is necessary. The human has compromised your neural integrity. No, Nexer, Callidra replied, standing now beside Marcus. He has reminded me of what we sacrificed generations ago and what we can reclaim. The guards looked between Nexer and their Empress, their own regulators visibly pulsing in erratic patterns as the cascading effect Matra had described intensified in Callidra's presence. For 100 years I've ruled through regulated stability, Callidra continued, addressing everyone in the chamber. 400 years of perfect control and emptiness. But there is another path, the path our ancestors knew before fear drove us to sacrifice feeling for security. She turned to Marcus, taking his hand in full view of the assembled Viraxians, a deliberate, revolutionary act. You said I would break you, Marcus whispered, for her ears alone. You have, she replied softly. And in breaking, I am becoming whole. She faced Nexo again, voice strengthening. The recalibration program ends today. Not just for me, but for any Viraxian who chooses connection over regulation. The Empire will collapse into chaos, Nexer warned. Or evolve into something stronger, Callidra countered. The choice belongs to each citizen, not to you, not even to me. As if in response, the palace communication systems suddenly activated, screens throughout the chamber displaying scenes from across the Empire, crowds gathering in city centers, regulators pulsing in synchrony with the Empress's new rhythm, Viraxians embracing each other in ways not seen for generations. Nexer stared at the images in disbelief. What have you done? I've stopped hiding from my own heart, Callidra answered. And it seems I am not alone. The great assembly hall of Viraxis Prime had stood for over 2,000 years, witnessing countless imperial proclamations. Yet none had generated the anticipation that now electrified the massive space as representatives from all 17 systems gathered to hear their Empress speak. 3 months had passed since the failed recalibration, 3 months of upheaval, adjustment, and remarkable change throughout the Empire. From his position near the Imperial platform, Marcus observed the assembled crowd. Unlike previous formal gatherings, this one bubbled with visible emotion animated conversations, expressions of concern, hope, even occasional laughter. Nervous? Asked Commander Ellis, now serving as Earth's official ambassador to the Varaxian Empire. For her? No, Marcus replied. For what comes next? Perhaps. The hall quieted as Calidra entered, not on a hovering dais or carried by ceremonial guards as tradition dictated, but walking among her people. Her midnight scales gleamed with renewed vitality, the constellation patterns shifting with subtle bioluminescence. Gone were the heavy ceremonial robes of imperial isolation, replaced by simpler attire that nonetheless radiated authority. Most striking was the regulator visible beneath her scales, no longer emitting the cold blue light of emotional suppression, but pulsing with a warm golden glow that many Viraxians throughout the hall now shared. As she took her place at the center of the assembly, Marcus noted the composition of her new advisory council, a mixture of traditional leadership and provincial representatives, including Commander the Lax and, surprisingly, a rehabilitated Nexer, his own regulator modified but still present. Citizens of the 17 systems, Calidra began, her melodic voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. For millennia, we built our civilization on the principle of emotional regulation, sacrificing personal feeling for collective stability. We believed this necessary for imperial coherence across vast distances of space and diversity of worlds. She gestured to the great stellar map that formed the hall's ceiling. We achieved remarkable feats of engineering, science, and governance. Yet we forgot what inspired our ancestors to reach for the stars in the first place: curiosity, wonder, passion, love. A murmur rippled through the assembly at the open declaration of such concepts, once considered dangerous disruptions to imperial harmony. 3 months ago, a choice was offered to all citizens: maintain traditional regulation or embrace the neural rebalancing that allows for both emotional capacity and rational thought to coexist. 70% of our population has chosen the latter. She turned slightly, acknowledging Marcus with a glance that carried unmistakable affection. Our human allies have reminded us that emotion need not undermine strength, that the capacity to feel deeply and think clearly are not opposing forces but complementary aspects of advanced consciousness. On cue, holographic displays activated throughout the hall, showing the progress of what was now called the Great Reawakening. Scientific achievements, artistic renaissances, strengthened community bonds, all emerging across the empire as Viraxians rediscovered their emotional heritage. There have been challenges, Calidra acknowledged. 3 centuries of emotional suppression cannot be undone without difficulty. We have established transition centers on every world to help citizens navigate the intensity of reawakened feelings. Marcus knew these challenges intimately, having helped design the transition program that paired human emotional intelligence specialists with Viraxian medical experts. Today, I announced the formation of the Unity Accord, Calidra continued. A new framework for governance that honors both our tradition of reasoned stability and our rediscovered capacity for connection. The assembly erupted in applause, another new behavior in imperial gatherings, as details of the accord appeared on holographic displays. What had begun as personal transformation between an empress and a human diplomat had catalyzed systemic change throughout 17 star systems. As the formal presentation concluded and the assembly broke into discussion groups, Calidra made her way to Marcus, courtiers discreetly creating a bubble of privacy around them. A significant change from the days when none dared approach the imperial person. The Tellurian ambassador seems concerned about the trade provisions, she noted, a hint of amusement in her silver eyes. He'll adjust once he realizes the benefits outweigh the changes, Marcus replied. How are you feeling? The simple question, impossible to ask an empress before their meeting, brought a soft smile to her face. Overwhelmed sometimes. Exhilarated often. Her hand found his, scales warm against skin. The neural pathways for emotion were never truly gone, just dormant. Each day brings new sensations, new understandings. And regrets? He asked gently. None, she answered firmly. Though Nexer still argues we've sacrificed centuries of stability for uncertain evolution. And your response? That certain stability is merely stagnation by another name. Her expression softened further. The empire lived in gray certainty. Now we experience the full spectrum, including shadows and brilliance alike. A subtle chime indicated the next phase of ceremonies would soon begin. Calidra straightened, imperial composure returning, though now balanced with visible emotion. There is one final announcement today, she said, suddenly serious. One that concerns you directly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh. The Council has approved the creation of a new position, interspecies liaison with ambassadorial status. Her silver eyes held his. But I wish to offer you another role entirely, if you would consider it. Before she could elaborate, they were interrupted by a court official announcing the commencement of the Unity ceremony. Calidra squeezed his hand once before returning to the Imperial platform. The private Imperial gardens shimmered under twin moonlight later that night, the celebration continuing throughout the capital city beyond palace walls. Marcus waited by the crystalline pool where exotic aquatic life created patterns of bioluminescence beneath the surface, much like the emotions now visibly flowing through Varaxian society. Forgive my tardiness. Calidra's voice came from behind him. Ceremonial obligations have multiplied rather than diminished with the reforms. She had changed from formal attire into simpler robes of deepest blue that matched her scales. The regulator at her sternum pulsed with golden light that seemed to intensify as she approached him. The ceremony was beautiful, Marcus said. Especially the children's choir. Varaxian music is returning quickly. Some arts were merely suppressed, not forgotten. She moved beside him, their shoulders almost touching. Expression finds a way, even through centuries of regulation. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moon's reflection in the pool. Finally, Calidra turned to face him fully. You never answered my proposition, she said softly. You never finished making it, he countered with a smile. Her hand rose to touch his face. The gesture that had once been forbidden, now performed with confidence. Marcus Vale, you have transformed an empire by showing one Empress the possibility of feeling again. Her voice carried emotions that would have been impossible months earlier: vulnerability, hope, desire. Would you consider a more permanent connection between our worlds? A diplomatic posting? He asked, though he knew that wasn't her meaning. A union, she clarified, taking both his hands in hers. Ancient Varaxian texts speak of soul bonding, a connection transcending physical form, joining two beings across the boundaries of species, space, even time. The regulator in her chest pulsed more intensely, its light seeming to reach toward him. In the observatory, when you first touched my hand, you said I would break you, Marcus reminded her. Are you certain this isn't simply the novelty of reawakened emotion? I have had 3 months to examine that possibility, she replied. My feelings have only deepened with understanding. What began as disruption has become foundation. She stepped closer, the space between them charged with more than just the electric attraction between different species. I was broken, she whispered. Broken open to possibility, to connection, to love. Not destroyed, but transformed. Marcus drew her into his arms, feeling the subtle vibration of her scales against his skin, the dual heartbeat that had evolved to accommodate both regulated stability and emotional depth. Yes, he answered simply, to whatever form this union takes. Calidra's eyes shimmered with moisture, another reclaimed capacity, as she leaned forward to press her forehead against his in the traditional Varaxian gesture of profound connection. Tomorrow we will announce the interspecies unity accord, she murmured. Tonight belongs only to us. As their lips met, human skin to Varaxian scales, the regulator between them flared with golden light that seemed to encompass them both. Above, the twin nebulae that had watched over her civilization for millennia appeared to pulse in rhythm with their embrace, as if the cosmos itself approved this unprecedented convergence. In 17 star systems, Varaxians looked up at the night sky and felt something new stirring within their awakening hearts. Not just the return of ancient emotions, but the promise of evolution beyond anything their regulated ancestors could have imagined. And in a garden where an empress had once walked alone for centuries, two beings from different worlds discovered that the greatest power in the universe wasn't perfect control, but the courage to let oneself be transformed by love.